J.T. Crowley is Talking Books. On the show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world. They'll give you their take on the writing process and how to create the secret sauce of page-turning deliciousness. Let's get into that magical mixture of the art and science of creativity. Here's J.T. Crowley, author of The Smart Kids, and your podcast host.
Hello, I'm J.T. Crowley, and I'm delighted to have as my guest today R J Hanson from nearby Dallas, Texas in the United States. For those of you that love epic fantasy, mythology, murder mysteries, psychological thrillers, well, pin your ears back, because this is what R J Hanson is all about. He covers all these genres with tension, excitement, and intrigue. For those of you that love J.R.R. Tolkien, Stephen King, Stephen Fabian, Terry Brooks, R.A. Salvatore, and possibly Terry Pratchett, this author, R J Hanson, I would strongly suggest you check him out. R J has long enjoyed reading, and his interest in high fantasy myths stems right back to when he was 5, when his mother gave him the Rankin and Bass production of The Hobbit. Those 24 pages opened up RJ's interest in this genre, to which he still loves to read today. Despite being an avid reader, it wasn't until RJ was 45 that he finally put pen to paper. RJ has written numerous books under 4 varying series that all come in under the overriding theme of Bloodlines Reforged saga. RJ has done a variety of things throughout his life. He's been a cowboy. He studied medieval combat and military tactics. And no doubt these studies stood him in good faith to create most, if not all, of the battle scenes in his books, everyone. RJ is married to Michelle. He has 2 grown-up children and presently runs one of the family's small cattle ranches just outside of Dallas. One of his favorite pastimes is pen and paper, PRG game Rollmaster, which tends to involve most of his family and friends. On the show today, we're going to talk about his trilogy book, Heirs of Vanity, and his first book in a separate series, Fires That Forge. Now, Fires That Forge is more a murder mystery, psychological thriller book belonging to the series Lords of Order and Chaos, Bloodlines Reforged saga. Heirs of Vanity, on the other hand, firmly lies in the genre of epic high fantasy. The trilogy book is a compendium of the 3 books that make up the series Heirs of Vanity. You firstly have Roland's Path in the trilogy book, labelled Part 1, Roland's Bow, the second book, labelled Part 2, and finally Roland's Triumph, the third book, under Part 3. So, let's invite RJ onto the show as my special guest today so that he can talk about his amazing books, which I was totally enthralled and taken in by. RJ, come and join me.
Thank you, John. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you on the show. I thoroughly enjoyed the books. They absolutely blew me away. And because I was a great J.R. Tolkien reader, I love the Hobbit stories. I love the Lord of the Rings. And when I look at your book, it reminded me so much, particularly the Heirs of Vanity book, so much of, that book, that genre. And of course, I love crime mysteries as well. So the murder mysteries of the Fires Forged was just wonderful. I didn't put that down. But there you go. Anyway, let's move on, everybody, and let's get to the nitty-gritty of what's in these books. RJ, all of your books and series, as far as I can see, come under the overriding umbrella Bloodlines Reforged saga. And that these epic fantasy books of yours are about sword and sorcery, adventures, tales of warriors' courage, scorned sorcerers, grieving vampires, corrupt churches, perversion of faith, sprinkled with plenty of magic, monsters, sword fights, political intrigue, mythology, medieval combat and tactics. And some series, I understand, fall under murder mysteries, thrillers, like the second book we're going to do today. So my question to you, RJ, is why did you choose to write about these genres? And did it stem from the one book that when you were 5, which your mother gave you to read, Has all this stemmed from that one book, and that you've so loved this genres that you've written about him?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I grew up in a small town in North Texas on a ranch. I mean, I loved the life, but as far as worldly, it was not. And that read along book, you know, it was one of the old, for the younger viewers, they may not have a clue what I'm talking about, but it was one of the old, you know, you get an album with the children's book and you put it on a record player and read along with it. And it was this whole incredible world. Sorry, that's Pinker. It's my Great Dane.
The Great Danes are wonderful, everybody.
A little bit. But yeah, it opened up this whole incredible world of rich imagination that enthralled me early on, and it really sparked my interest in reading. You know, it made me realize that in between the front and back cover of a book could be a whole new world, a whole different world. And it was really amazing.
So how long did it take you from concept to publishing Heirs of Vanity books?
Oh, I guess that would depend on when you would want to set the time frame for the concept. It's the Heirs of Vanity books and the overall saga had its genesis with Roland, which was a pen and paper character. For those of you that don't know what Rollmaster is, think Dungeons and Dragons. You know, it's and it was a character that I created in 1996 to play with some friends of mine. And after a few gaming sessions, I started, like a lot of players do, I started taking notes of the cool things that happened to him, the cool things that he did, you know, the things that I found interesting, just so that I wouldn't forget about them, and to enrich the character. And the more of those notes I took, the more a story grew from those notes. I guess maybe in 2003, I decided I wanted to write a book about it, and I did. And then I put that book on the shelf and didn't do anything with it until about 2017. And in 2017, my daughter Katie asked me if I was ever going to do anything with it. And well, the short version is I decided to do something with it. So I gave it an edit and started filling it out some more. And I got serious about it in 2017, and then we published in March of 2019.
So it's been on the board for a long while.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
RJ, let's get to the nitty-gritty of this podcast and open up the book, Heirs of Vanity Trilogy. Let's have a look at Part 1, Roland's Path, Book 1. This story is all about the escape of two servants of evil under Roland's watch. He's driven by shame and vanity to track them down with the help of his lifelong friend, Eldrin. The road they ventured down is fraught with all possible kinds of dangers and issues. And of course, they're dealing with a sorcerer of unknown quantity and a woman of beguiling interest who, though beautiful and mesmerizing, has skills of her own to be very, very aware of, everyone. Where did this storyline come from? Where in your deep brain, your inner recesses of your deep brain, did this plot storyline come from? Tell us.
I'm not really sure. It's one of those things. I had to have an origin story for him. Based on, when I started playing him, they all have sometimes have kind of a cardboard cutout origin story. So that needed to be fleshed out. And I needed a reason for Roland to leave home, to depart from his father and defy his father, and a reason for him to to justify himself, to take that first step out on the road. And I realized the best way, given his personality, would be a failure on his part, something that he felt he had to make amends for, something that he felt he had to make right, which is where the idea of the escape and then the pursuit came from. And then with Eldrin, Roland and Eldrin have a very, very tight relationship. They were raised as brothers, essentially. I wanted the beginning of the book to establish that, to show that relationship between the two of them.
I think you do that very well. RJ, just to give us a tantalizing taste to this tense, epic fantasy of yours, and believe me, everybody, they are tense. When you read the storylines, you go into the chapters, they are exciting, they're tense, the tension is there, the battles, the struggles, they're all there in glorious technicolor, if you want to put that here. I don't particularly like using metaphors, but I just did because it's true. But I want to go to chapters 3 and 4 in Roland's Path, the first part of the trilogy book. And because these chapters are headed up the wildlands and ruins of Null Cambador. Now, what I liked about these two chapters is the relationship, and you've already said this, the bonds of the characters between Roland and Eldrin. And I think we have to include Ashcliffe here.
Absolutely.
The relationship they have with each other and how their individual characteristics blend so well together. Ashcliffe with his knowledge of herbs and edible plants, particularly the healing powers they have. Eldred with his heraldic skills and weaponry, and Roland, the main protagonist, with his flame blade dagger. These scenes I found, as I said, they were exciting, they're tense, they're full of adventure. RJ, can you give the listeners an overriding view of what's in these two chapters? For I think they were just mesmerizing. Tell the listeners.
Well, in the one chapter where the three boys, because they're boys, 14 to 16 years old, and they're traveling through the wildlands, the untamed lands, ogres and giants and monsters and that sort of thing. And each of the three of them is taken on the role of a man. And it's about them, discovering what those roles really mean, what those roles really require. And it's about them discovering the fact that they need each other. And they have to come to rely on each other. It puts me in mind the most when I was writing that chapter. What I thought of the most was Stephen King's story, Stand By Me, where the bulk of the story is about this group of boys who are all, childhood friends, and they go on this trek to go see a corpse by the train, by the railroad tracks and all that. But the story is really about them traveling together out in the woods and, the things that they get into. And that's what it made me think the most of. Only there's giants and ogres and that sort of thing. That's really what it's about, is them beginning to learn what the lives they've chosen are going to require from them.
Do you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of in, The Hobbit, and again in, the Lord of the Rings books, of the, Frodo and all his friends, the main characters there going off on this dangerous venture.
Right.
That's what I saw. So if you're a Tolkien fan, you've got to read this book, everybody. So Ruins of Null Cambador.
I'm sorry?
The Ruins of Null Cambador, that chapter.
It's the thing I like the most about that chapter is, up until that point, Roland has decided he's going to capture or kill these two. and he's getting, they know that they're close now. They know it's about to come to a head, and Roland's afraid. And it's a relatively new sensation for him to be afraid. And it's not a fear of dying. It's not a fear of, being injured or any other, terrible physical thing. He's afraid of failing. He's terrified of failure. And it's his first chance to really have to face that fear and work his way through it.
Do you think he's afraid of his father?
He's not afraid of his father. He's afraid of disappointing his father. He's terrified of disappointing his father. He definitely has daddy issues, I guess, would be the modern vernacular for that. His whole life, his whole mindset is to accomplish enough, to do enough, to make his father proud of him.
Let's move on, RJ, to part 2, book 2, Roland's Bow. Here we have the sorcerer of the marshes, cursed by the past. Can Roland trust the sorcerer's daughter? We have Roland and Eldrin sailing the seas of Stratbus with the Slandics. They're sailing off into distant lands. Roland's nerves are tested to the full here. Will he have both? Has he got the physical or the emotional strength to deal with the world's evils and his own integrity? Embellish, embroider, tell us what this one is about. The story to this book.
Well, this book is a continuation of their journey. Like a lot of life's journeys, as you think that you're going from A to B, you realize that B was not your destination at all. Now you're going on to C, and so on. So this book is really about them discovering more of the world around them and discovering that they've, I hate to use the phrase because it's used so often, but it's about them discovering what they've stumbled into and how much a larger plot that they've uncovered. But my favorite thing about book 2 is it's got pirates. And everything is cooler with pirates.
I know. And that's why you chose chapter 17 to talk about. So let's go to chapter 17. I love this as well. And because this is headed up Souls of Mariners. Now, this really did catch both of our imaginations because I love the chapter. You've got the battle with the pirate ship, the tactics the Slandic captain and the crew used to upset the pirates, particularly with the planks. You tell us here, because I found this captivating. I thought, wow, this is clever.
I have always had a fascination with sailing, with seagoing vessels of the old style, the old 3-master ships and schooners and that sort of thing, which is odd because I personally am terrified of the ocean. But I've always had this fascination with sailing. And this chapter caused me, I had to do a lot of research for this chapter because I wanted to get the terminology correct. And I wanted to make sure the maneuvers of the ships were relatively accurate, were tactically feasible. So it required a great deal of research, but I loved doing the research because I love reading about that stuff. And I was trying to come up with a tactic that, hasn't been beaten to death. We've all seen the pirate movies and, those things where it's, okay, we're going to turn our cannons this way. And then Errol Flynn is going to swing on a rope from one mast on one ship to a mast on the other. And I didn't want to have any of that. I wanted it to be something new, something original. And I was very happy with the way that came out.
You need to, it's about the planks, everybody. I'm saying no more. Shh. Read the book. RJ, the third part of the book is just riveting. Roland's triumph. And here we've got, an unseen evil, unseen evil prevails. Davis's forces retreat, but their presence lingers in Lorek. Roland faces several choices, one to his lord, the other to his betrothed. Does Roland ignore his father's wise counsel, or what of Claire's own dilemmas? And will her love for him see him through? And I think, so this is an interesting storyline you've got here in this Roland's Triumph book, the third book of the series, the third part of this book. Where on earth did you conjure this storyline up from?
Well, the great thing about writing a good story is that the story writes itself. A lot of people are confused in thinking that an author sits down and writes the story that he wants to write and that it ends the way he wants it to end. The truth is, what the author does, in my opinion, what I do, I'll just put it that way. What I do is I have these characters, and then I follow along and I take notes while they're doing whatever it is they do. Each character has their own thoughts, their own ambitions, their own means of accomplishing those ambitions. So what I do is I just follow the characters to see where they're going, and then I write down what they're doing, or what they've done. So as to the credit for the storyline, that really goes to the characters of the book, because it's a result of the decisions they made and their choices.
Do your characters live with you when you're writing the book? Do they say to you, come on, get the next bit done?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've got a lot of voices in my head. A lot of them.
So
you're
not an author that sits down to start with and plots it out in the nth degree from start to finish and sticks to that structure. You're like me, it just wherever it flows.
Right.
Yeah. Let's go to chapter 41. I think this is brilliant, everyone. And it's called The Keep. The Keep is a brilliant chapter for me in the third and final part of this trilogy. Roland is recovering from some serious wounds. He thinks he's fit for the next battle, but Prince Ralston, a clever military strategist, thinks differently. We've got dark elves, we've got paladins, we've got noblemen of the realm, and of course the demise of Davri's army with the taking of the keep. RJ, briefly tell us what is going on behind the scenes here. Again, we've got tension, we've got excitement, we've got adventure, we've got thrills coursing through this chapter. Tell us about it, and tell everybody why you call it the keep.
Well, the keep, the obvious meaning for that is, this chapter is about Roland and friends, along with Prince Ralston and his army, finally cornering the sorcerer, driving him back to his keep, to his castle, and assaulting it. That's, the main crux of the action in the chapter. But the keep is also, medievally or metaphorically speaking, it's your central stronghold. It's your last refuge, whether that be a physical building of stone around you, or whether it be your faith in something, your faith in yourself or in a higher power. And this chapter causes a lot of the characters involved to fall back to that keep of their own, to rely on that faith of their own. And and to rely on their own endurance.
What struck me about this chapter was Prince Ralston. He sees further down the line, you know, he knows that he's got to plan this. And yes, Roland wants to, you know, oh, I can carry on. He knows he can't carry on. And he sees differently. And that's what a general has to do. They have to see above the parapet, don't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a that interaction is a point where Roland is faced, one of the many times he's faced with wisdom that he has to admit is wisdom. He has to admit that it's the right thing to do, but he does not like it. He does not like making, you know, such an admission. And in this chapter, one of my favorite things about this chapter actually doesn't have anything to do with the action that's going on, you know, at the keep, but it's a small little section of the chapter, which is a conversation between the gods of Stratos. You know, conversations between Father Time and Bolvi, who's, you know, their god of war. And the thing I like about that conversation is that it sort of, you know, it pulls the curtain back a little bit. And it, you know, it reveals that men attribute so much that goes on in the world to their deities, when in fact it's men finding scapegoats for their own desires. You know, I'm going to follow Bolvi. He's the god of war, and I'm going to go make war. No, you're just kind of a violent butthead. You know, Bolvi doesn't want you attacking people and you know, sacking villages and so on. And I like that. I like that it points that out. You know, there are a number of scholars and even many more laymen that talk about the dichotomy of the Crusades. You know, we're going to go to a foreign land and attack these people for God. I'm pretty sure that's not in the Bible anywhere. You know, I'm pretty sure God didn't say, I want you to, you know, go to the Middle East and attack these people. No, it was, you know, it was the greed of those in power at the time, you know, who wanted what somebody else had, and they attributed or scapegoated God to disguise their own greed. And you know, there's a little bit of that going on here as well. And that's what I love about that conversation, is it shows that the deities aren't pushing people around on a chessboard. By and large, they're observing, you know, and maybe helping out here and there.
And that's why you asked me to, let's talk about the chapter. Yeah. The trilogy RJ has excited me. It's beautifully written, with all the tensions, the thrills, the benches, the twists, the sorcery, the intrigue, the monsters, the magical mythology. I just say to you, well done. It's absolutely amazing, everybody.
Thank you.
RJ, we need to move on now to Fires That Forge. The first book in another series of yours, Lords of Order and Chaos, again under the umbrella of Bloodlines Reforged Saga. This book is not epic fantasy, everybody, or high fantasy. It's a murder mystery, psychological thriller, packed with creative, visionary writing. A story of murder, betrayal, lies, and magic. Can one inquisitor's quest for the truth in a city bound for chaos be saved? We have a young physician turned king's inquisitor facing an uphill struggle to save his friend, the hospital, and himself from the hangman's noose. Where, when, and how did you create this storyline?
This actually sort of, I've been thinking about a murder mystery set in a fantasy world for a long time. Sean Connery was in a movie years ago called The Brotherhood of the Rose. And it's Sean Connery and I can't remember the other actors that were in it, but he's a monk in the Middle Ages who travels to a monastery to investigate these mysterious deaths. And it's a murder mystery set in a monastery in the Middle Ages. And I loved that story, and I loved that idea. And I always wanted to do something like that. And this Fires That Forge gave me the opportunity to write a murder mystery set in a fantasy setting, where the investigators have to take into account things like magic and monsters and vampires and that sort of thing. But they take those things into account very realistically, the same way that, investigators today take into account fingerprints and DNA and, crime scene video and that sort of thing. It's part of the job for them. And I wanted that to come across as real, as gritty. It's not, it's not fantasy and it's not fun for them. It's, a real murder, and it's real people.
When I looked at the book, I was drawn, RJ, to two chapters that stood out for me. Chapter 6, Witness, Priests and Lies, and Chapter 17, Who Betrays Who? That's very interesting, everybody. For me, in Chapter 6, what I liked most was the conversation by Dunwell, the Inquisitor, and Mylon, one of the workers on the docks, Warehouse 14, the wooden shack that he shared with his other working colleagues, compared to some of the grand stone houses of Moras. Of course, this Dunwell is looking for witnesses, that could save Silas Moras. We've got Lord High Inquisitor Guilorn. We've got Dunwell's boss. We've got the High Cleric Dylance. Dunwell interviewing the young Dr. Moras. We're talking, of the murder of Stuart Killian and Lady Helena and lots of other issues. And again, we've got vampires, we've got excitement, we've got vision here. I love this chapter. Do you like it?
I do. Writing the interview of the witness was fun for me, because, well, I've been a cop since 1996. So I've got about 26 years on, and I've been a detective for the majority of that time. So I've had a lot of conversations like this. I've interviewed a lot of witnesses and a lot of suspects. And it allowed me, this whole book allowed me to use that knowledge, what I've learned over the years, that experience and training, to implement that into the story and to give it more of a real feel. For example, there's a trick that Dunwell uses when he's interviewing the witness, Mylon. And I've used that trick a number of times, and it works. It works really well, which is why I incorporated it. And I love the fact that it gives that a sense of realism.
And the other chapter that caught my imagination, as I said, was chapter 17, Who Betrays Who? And, who is betraying who here? And when you look at it, you're thinking, yeah, who is? RJ, there's so much, circumstantial evidence, swirling around this chapter. You talk about Silas Moras discovering that fallen champions, often travel on an ethereal plane adjacent to the plane, of existence. So much of this chapter evolves around Silas and Dunwell, assassins, Shezum. You really are twisting the knife here, aren't you, to keep the readers guessing as to what is going on here. That's why it's who is betraying who, aptly named.
The thing I like the most about this chapter, well, it is very fast paced in that
it is.
Motives are revealed, motives change. Some of the characters are forced into a corner where they have to agree to circumstances, or at the very least have to accept some circumstances that they're not crazy about. But the thing I like the most about this chapter is it's really when Silas begins coming into his own, when he really begins taking initiative and taking the wheel in his own life. And I like that. I like that.
I loved it. And I thought the title was aptly named. I mean, just very briefly, RJ, out of that book, what's your favorite chapter? I picked two.
Man, a favorite is really, really difficult. Really, I would have to say, I want to say it's I think it's chapter 4, where Dunwell and Silas are just having a conversation. There's not a lot going on, there's not a lot of action. But it's just the two of them talking and visiting. And I like that chapter the most because, well, like we talked about earlier, both of these characters live in my head. And this was a chance for me to, kind of sit on the couch across the room and just hang out with both of them, and the two of them, visit and get to catch up. And that's what I really liked about it. Like I said, not a lot of intrigue in that chapter, not a lot of action, but just two friends hanging out.
You sure know how to twist the knife, don't you, in your stories? So what's next? What's next for you, RJ, both in terms, of your writing, your life? I mean, are there any more books in the pipeline?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We just released Stalking Shadows, which is book 4 in the Lords of Order and Chaos series. And there are so many more. Because the Bloodlines Reforged saga is going to consist of at least 4 different series that all intertwine and overlap. The Heirs of Vanity and the Lords of Order and Chaos are all in the same world. They're in the same universe, and there is some overlap. Dunwell served on the battlefront with Roland's father, Velric, and that's mentioned, touched on in Fires that Forge. Brutus, who is in Roland's Triumph, fairly prominently, Sir Brutus, is a good friend of Dunwell's. And, at the end of toward the beginning of Fires that Forge, Dunwell and Brutus have a beer together, and visit before Brutus is going off to Lawrick, where he, later joins with Roland in the game. And this saga is going to span generations.
So there's more coming down the line.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Not to throw out too many spoilers, but, eventually we're going to get to the actions, adventures, and lives of Roland's grandchildren.
Ooh. So who do you see, RJ, as your market for your books? But more importantly, who would you like to see reading your books? Young people, mature folk, or people of all ages, all genres?
I think people of all ages would enjoy it. I tried to write the books so that they're clean, I guess, so to speak. There's no bad language. There aren't any sex scenes. It's some graphic violence, no doubt about that. Very graphic violence. But
oh yeah.
I tried to write it so that an 8 or a 9-year-old could pick it up and read it and enjoy the sword fighting and the adventures, or a 70-year-old could pick it up and read it and enjoy the sword fighting and the adventures and the political intrigue behind the movers and shakers of Strathus.
Absolutely. It's a bit like, J.R. Tolkien. Yes, a 12-year-old can read the book, and so can an 80-year-old read the book. That's what he's done brilliantly. And I think that's what you've done as well. Brilliantly done it. Phenomenal.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Where can people get your books from?
Amazon, primarily. You can find them on Amazon under the Bloodlines Reforged saga, or under my name, R J Hanson. You can find them on our website, which is www.bloodlinesreforged.com. You can also find them on Audible. Almost all of them are on Audible. We've begun production of the latest book, Stalking Shadows. We began production on the audiobook for that last week. So that's in the pipeline and will be coming out in probably a couple of months, would be my guess.
Excellent. R J Hanson, thank you for being my guest today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, you're very, very, very welcome. Just go and read the books, everybody. They are stunning. They're amazing. They're absolutely, ooh. As I end every week with my podcast, everyone, I'm JT Crowley. Thanks for listening, watching, wherever you're in the world. So until next time, stay safe.